If one's to change these systems, one of the things is to have a sense of where we want to get to in the long run. In that sense, you need to name what the destination is. And if the destination is that everybody in the system has an option for an individual support, however imperfect that is, then that's what we should be trying to get from here to there about. It's very unlikely that one could get there in a short term, because you're really not just creating something new, you're having to undo something that's been in place. And so in this sense, a very key strategic thing is really the incremental transformation of the system, almost on a year-by-year basis. You want to extend the individualization as far forward as you can, given the constraints of that particular year. And of course, one of those constraints is it would be present typically in systems that lack experience with individualization, would be that they don't have the right people that have had a track record of doing it. And so you've got inexperienced people trying to do something, if you like, they may not be ready for prime time. They may, in fact, worsen the situation because they're so inept. So in that sense, it's very important to look at the people investments, the capacity building investments that will make it possible for people to become more proficient with it over time. And so in this sense, not hurrying the process could be helpful if it really means that the incubation of a new generation of talent to do this is deliberately being grown and deployed, as quickly and as sensibly as possible. There have been examples of systems that deployed the funding long before people knew anything about how to manage it well. And so what it became was an individually funded experimental kind of travesty in many ways, because there wasn't enough investment in people capacity and organizational capacity to ensure that the outcomes would be a little more predictable and reliable. In this sense, there'd be examples of dumping people into individualization prematurely because the people doing the individualization are still novices. So in that sense, some of the classical capacity building strategies apply to personalization, one of which would be that, of course, if you want to grow talent, you need to pick the most promising talent, because you're going to ask that people do something that few have done. So you want the people that are kind of extraordinarily suited to do that first. And so that means a very careful selection of who takes the lead, who's put into these situations, because these are people that have to kind of improvise something that wasn't there before. And in that sense, it's breaking new ground. Secondly, you need to train and mentor them by people that have done it. That people that have done something for several decades typically have a sense of how you do it. People that are enthused about the idea but have never done it aren't the same. They're enthusiastic, but they don't have a track record, and so they don't know what they don't know. And so in that sense, good mentoring is very helpful. Thirdly, there needs to be good evaluation, almost in real time, of what has worked well, what hasn't, and cycle that feedback back into the decision making, so that people are learning from the mistakes and are, if you like, becoming able to kind of finesse more, because they're seeing what's working and why it's not working and what would have worked better, that sort of thing. So in a sense, what they're doing is building up a kind of culture of good practice, and that's very helpful, and it does grow that way over time. The fourth kind of dimension of capacity building is, of course, values and principles, that you can't do excellent things if you don't have excellent values and principles. And so much of this isn't driven by money or even method, so much as it is by vision and values for what is trying to be achieved in the end for people. because that informs how people are partnered with, how they're treated, what is taken seriously, and it means that people's lines in the sand are consistent with good outcomes. And again, people often have good stated principles, but may have trouble operationalizing them. So in this sense, even people that are very sincere may struggle with how to turn a valid principle into a reality on the ground for an individual. In this sense, there may be limits to how to operationalize that, all of which will affect quality. And that's why it's important to look at values-related performance issues as early and as often as possible going forward. Another would be, of course, the role of independent monitoring of this process by the people affected and by their families, by external advocates and whatnot, because they will be much more prepared to name a problem long before people that are struggling with the problem would be willing to do that. So in that sense, a very good safeguard are the very careful collecting of good input and guidance and oversight from people that are pretty savvy advocates and can evaluate what they're seeing quite accurately. So these are examples of things that, of course, get developed and put into place in many systems. And if they aren't in place, then there'll be shortcomings down the road because they didn't put those things in place. But I could go on about this, but these are samples of some of those systemic and programmatic capacity building features.